Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are opening a set of source materials that are, well, they offer a pretty unprecedented view into the machinery of U.S. intelligence.
And a highly disturbing one.
A very disturbing one, yeah. We're looking at operations that span the Cold War era and well beyond. This deep dive is really about the intersection of global finance, drug trafficking, and a level of political secrecy that, frankly, few have ever managed to document.
It's an extraordinary stack of documents we've been tasked with synthesizing. Our core material it centers on a highly classified FBI top-secret report.
And it has a specific date.
It does. July 7, 1989. And it was generated for and addressed directly to Senator Edward Kennedy.
Which is a detail we need to hold on to.
Absolutely. And to complement that, we have a whole slew of subsequent legal filings and financial documents. And they all relate to this shadowy entity that's just called the Five-Star Trust.
Right. So our mission today is really to follow the thread. We're going to follow the money and the operational history that this FBI report lays out. It calls it the Japanese, Singapore, New Zealand, Kentucky connection.
A mouthful.
It is, but it's a connection that allegedly weaves this thread through, decades of covert action. It ties together the highest levels of U.S. and international politics with these massive financial schemes.
And when you say massive, we're not exaggerating. One of the central items is a certificate of deposit worth 318 billion Japanese yen.
Billion with a B. And then there's the other side of the coin, highly organized, state-sanctioned drug trafficking.
The stakes here are just immense. I mean, you look at this 1989 FBI report, the foundational document for almost all of this, and it warns Senator Kennedy in no uncertain terms.
What does it say?
It says that if the information it contained were ever leaked.
Leaked, not even officially released.
No, just leaked. It says over 15 years of operational work involving the FBI, CIA, Navy, Marines, you name it. All of it would be thrown into total disarray.
Total disarray. That's a system collapse.
It is. And what's more, the report says that disclosure would require an immediate, full-scale investigation into one specific individual, Major General Robert L. Ferrera.
That warning right there is a headline. It tells us we are dealing with a history that wasn't just meant to be classified, it was meant to be actively suppressed because its exposure would, it would just break things.
Exactly. The intelligence community would implode. So this deep dive is your shortcut to understanding that complex, really compartmentalized operational history.
A history involving presidential aides, CIA directors, international bankers, drug lords. The whole cast of characters is here. We really need to cut through the sensationalism and just look at the mechanisms they allegedly used. Okay, let's unpack this.
So the foundation of this whole sprawling operation, which was later codenamed Eagle 2, was really laid between 1966 and 1976.
And the core idea, the main driver, was this desire to create an intelligence apparatus that was completely, totally free from democratic oversight.
Yes. Free from Congress, free from accountability. Yeah. And according to the sources, the architect of this operational freedom was the CIA director at the time, Richard Helms.
Right. The report says Helms made the decision, and it notes this, with the implied approval of the Oval Office, to draft a blueprint for a secret CIA operation, one specifically designed to bypass Congress.
And its irritating habit of asking where the money goes.
Exactly. They don't want anyone looking at the receipts.
And this brings us to the crucial legal mechanism they used to cloak all of this. It's the 1949 Central Intelligence Agency Act.
Okay, break that down for us. What did that act allow them to do?
Well, Helms intended to invoke this act to provide absolute immunity from oversight. What's so important for you to grasp here is that this act gives the CIA director the authority to spend funds based on vouchers only.
Vouchers only.
Vouchers only. Without regard to any existing laws about public funding of government operations. It's a blank check.
So they weren't just hiding the operation's existence. They were using a 20-year-old law to basically create a parallel, unauditable budget. A black hole that Congress or even the General Accounting Office couldn't investigate.
Precisely. Yeah. The money just vanishes. The goal was total self-funding and absolute operational economy. And Helms was so convinced of this. The sources cite an intercepted memo he sent to the Oval Office.
And in it,
he states that if Congress or any uninformed do-gooders ever got a whiff of this, the agency would just invoke the 1949 Act to exempt itself from all laws requiring disclosure of functions, names, salaries, personnel, everything.
That is the blueprint for a truly deep shadow state. It's not just a secret project, it's a secret system of governance.
It is. And to execute this vision, Helms needed well, he needed specialized talent.
Yeah.
People who knew how to operate entirely outside the rule book.
And this is where he assembled this small elite group of 5 individuals. The sources call them the Gang of 5.
Let's break down that roster because the names are historically significant, to say the least. First up, General Edward Lansdale.
Lansdale, the counterinsurgency guy.
The guy. A top CIA asset known all over the world for his expertise. His work with the Huk rebels in the Philippines was legendary.
So what was his role in Eagle 2?
His role was operational. He was in charge of handling the distribution networks for what the report vaguely and kind of chillingly calls undesirables.
Undesirables? What does that even mean?
It's left intentionally vague, but the implication is anyone or anything that needed to be moved or dealt with quietly. He also ran the collection services. He was the guy who could make things happen on the ground without leaving any fingerprints.
Okay, so that's one. Who's next?
Next, we have William Colby. Colby was given total command of executing the blueprint. He was the network manager.
So if Lansdale was ground operations, Colby was.
Colby was handling the actual field collections. The report uses these specific words: the runners, peddlers, pushers, and collectors.
So the mechanics of the drug trade.
It seems so. And in the most chilling detail of all, he was also responsible for the elimination of anyone within their growing network who was deemed an uncontrollable.
An uncontrollable. So he was the enforcer, the hitman.
Colby represented the ruthless operational edge. If Helms was the conceptual godfather, Colby was the one running the day-to-day enforcement.
Okay, that's 2. Who's number 3?
Number 3, Richard Armitage enters the picture. He's brought on as the top CIA asset, and the sources pointedly identify him as Bush's personal gopher.
A gopher.
That's the term they use. It implies he was handling the sensitive intermediary work, making sure communications flowed seamlessly between the operational heads, like Colby, and the political component.
Which brings us to the political component.
It does. But first, the 4th member was Lt. Colonel Robert Ferrera. This is the man the FBI report is about.
The man they said they'd have to investigate if this leaked.
The very one. Ferrera was chosen for his staggering skill set. He supposedly had command of a dozen languages. He was a founder of the Special Forces, the Green Berets, and he had a huge pre-existing network of contacts all across Latin America and the Middle East.
And his specific job?
His specific shilling order from Colby was to use those contacts to obtain the narcotics: heroin, cocaine, marijuana, LSD, and others. Whatever was needed to be sold to provide the black funds for the entire operation, he was the sourcer.
Unbelievable. So you have the strategist, the enforcer, the political liaison, the drug sourcer, who was the 5th member.
The 5th member, George Bush.
The future president.
Future president. The sources say he was chosen partly for his reputation from wartime flying and because he was recognized as being on the way up the political ladder, a rising star.
And his function was?
His specific function was handling the secret head of this fictitious airline they created called Overseas National Airline, or ONA. And crucially, he was also tasked with the illegal currency forging needed to fund the operation's initial expenses.
So this group, this Gang of 5, they established Operation Eagle 2. You said it's named after a predecessor.
Yes, a nod to the Flying Tigers from World War II. And the source material notes something incredible about ONA, the airline.
What's that?
It was established without owning a single aircraft. Not one.
It's a paper airline.
Completely. But it immediately received contracts for all civilian, military, and drug cargo moving into the critical regions of the Pacific Rim and Southeast Asia. The infrastructure was built on paper, ready to be immediately weaponized.
And the compartmentalization must have been intense.
It was the master plan. Bush handles the airline and the funny money. Armitage is the political go-between. Lansdale manages the ground game. Ferrera gets the drugs. And Colby oversees the whole network and, handles internal security.
With extreme prejudice, it sounds like.
Exactly. And that brings us to what the sources call the dark phase. Even before Eagle 2 was fully up and running, Colby initiated this terrifying internal security measure.
Which was?
It was essentially a continuation of the Phoenix program from Vietnam. The sources claim Colby became, quote, insane with his power during this period.
Insane with power how?
By executing over 2,500 U.S. citizens and over 20,000 suspects to consolidate control and silence any potential threats to the operation.
Wait, 2,500 U.S. citizens? That can't be right.
That's the number in the source material. It's a staggering figure, and it's what caused the first major fracture in the Gang of 5.
I would imagine so.
Helms reportedly accused Colby of being a collaborator and tried to force him to resign. But this is where Colby's, his ruthlessness or his shrewdness becomes really apparent.
What did he do?
The source material suggests Colby had kept meticulous copies of everything, all the plans, all the secret records. He'd basically created an insurance policy against both Helms and the former director, Dulles. He had leverage.
So the head of the operation, Helms, tried to fire his chief enforcer, Colby, who was running a domestic death squad, but he couldn't because Colby had the receipts on everyone.
That's it. It's a perfect illustration of how this network protected itself. The blackmail loop was built right into the system from day one.
So what happened to Colby?
It secured his future. The final arrangement allowed Colby to withdraw, but only after Dulles promised him that he would eventually become the director of the CIA.
A promise that was kept.
A promise Helms later honored. So with the operational blueprint set and the internal dissent quieted, the stage was now ready for the next, equally massive challenge, getting the billions in funding they needed.
Which brings us to Japan.
Which brings us to the Japanese financial scheme.
Okay, so we're shifting now from operational security and drug sourcing to high finance. Operation Eagle Tuck-In needed a cash injection. A huge one, big enough to stabilize an entire political party.
And that takes us to Japan in 1973.
What was the crisis?
The sources detail a very specific political crisis. The ruling party, the Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, was effectively bankrupt, completely broke.
And they were facing a takeover.
A real threat of being toppled by an obscure rival party. And here's the critical detail. The sources claimed that this rival party was itself controlled by the CIA.
Hold on. So the CIA needed to fund the ruling party to prevent a takeover by its own puppet party. That makes no sense.
It creates this completely paradoxical situation. It seems the proxy party was seen as less reliable, or perhaps its victory would have been too chaotic. So the CIA needed to fund the ruling party to maintain stability.
And the amount of money was staggering.
Staggering. The LDP needed vast, untraceable funds. The decision was made to funnel over 300 billion Japanese yen into the LDP's coffers.
To do what with it?
To, and I'm quoting here, buy the necessary votes and membership loyalty to stay in power. It was a straight-up political bailout happening completely in the shadows.
And this wasn't some low-level scheme. It had high-level approval.
All the way to the top of Japanese power. It was facilitated by what the documents call the imperial connection, the relationship between Emperor Hirohito and his cousin, Prince Haruko Watanabe.
And the prince.
He gave an open door to Japanese politicians and the Diet. Essentially, he gave tacit imperial approval for this extra-legal financial maneuver.
And the centerpiece of this whole financial operation.
Okay.
It's a single piece of paper.
It is. Detailed with extraordinary precision in the source documents. Cash certificate of deposit number 40451100-92. It was issued by Mitsui Bank Ltd. Home Office in Tokyo.
And the value was?
The value was an astronomical 318 billion yen. That's $318 million. It also carried a 5% interest rate issued in August of 1977.
This wasn't just cash then. It was an asset, a promise backed by one of the world's most powerful economies.
Exactly. It was intended to be used as a liquid convertible asset.
So they needed a way to move this money. Who did they pick?
Prince Watanabe handpicked the conduit, a man named Soichi Iizuka, a wealthy party member and a noted multi-billionaire.
And Iizuka's job was?
His instruction was critical. Acquire the CD and then sell it to a third party. The whole point was to wash the funds.
To make them clean.
To make them clean. And then pass them through George Bush's gold certificates into the U.S. Treasury.
Okay, let's unpack that process, because that sounds technically dense. How does that work?
To wash the funds means making the origin completely untraceable. By passing the yen CD through Bush's pre-positioned gold certificates, which were instruments often used for off-the-books government transactions, they could convert the yen into what looked like clean U.S. dollars.
And no one in Congress would ever see it.
No legislative scrutiny at all. The cover story was that all the investments made with Iizuka's money in various foreign countries would eventually fail or be losers.
Ah, so that provided a clean, legitimate excuse for why this huge pile of money was suddenly being transferred to a U.S. nominee.
Precisely. It's a brilliant, if utterly cynical, financial strategy.
So if the funds were going to be washed and sent to the Treasury by the Eagle 2 group, they needed the perfect middleman. A buyer who was just plausible enough to complete the loop without looking too official.
And that leads us to the Kentucky connection.
Of course.
Indeed. The FBI report identifies Marion Horn Jr., known as J.R. Horn Jr. from Kentucky, as the first perfect buyer.
And Horn wasn't an intelligence guy.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
A civilian entrepreneur. He was chosen because he had a known history of mixing financial transactions in what the report calls the gray zone. Always borderline, never fully illegal, but aggressive and high risk.
His personal profile was what made him attractive to Helms and the group.
It was. He was the consummate entrepreneur, always developing these massive projects without the necessary financial backing, but somehow pulling them off. To Helms and another figure, Baron Daphne, Horn, and the Eagle II operation seemed made for each other.
So this was the birth of a buyer.
That's the exact phrase the sources use. And Horn's essential contribution was validation. He had to make the CD look legitimate on the U.S. side.
How did he do that?
The sources confirm he managed to get the original CD validated by the consular office at the U.S. Embassy in Japan.
The U.S. Embassy rubber-stamped it.
They did. This validation was confirmed by a U.S. official named Francis Lyde. The fact that the U.S. Embassy put its stamp on this massive, secret financial instrument gave the operation the official veneer of legitimacy it desperately needed.
What stands out in the report, though, is what happened to her, to Francis Lyde.
Yes. The one who confirmed the validation, she subsequently disappeared.
And that immediately connects the high finance back to the ruthless operations we were just talking about.
And that connection is tragically confirmed elsewhere in the report. The audacity of this scheme had deadly consequences for the original holders in Japan, too.
What happened?
The FBI report includes documentation that 3 junior assistants in Mitsui Bank, the ones who confirmed the CD on the Japanese side, were each given $1 million by the Japanese government.
A payoff.
A payoff for their silence. Because all 3 men subsequently died in identical fashion at the exact same spot in time.
Suggesting highly coordinated assassinations.
It screams it. The implication is crystal clear. This wasn't just a financial transaction. It was a high-risk political venture where any failure to maintain secrecy resulted in immediate fatal consequences.
So this pool of 318 billion yen was essentially soaked in blood and political necessity.
And it was needed urgently to fund the next phase of operations, which were shifting focus to Central America.
Okay, so as the Japanese financial scheme was being put into place to secure all this long-term capital, the operational needs of U.S. intelligence shifted pretty dramatically.
They did. In 1981, William Casey takes over as CIA director, replacing Admiral Stansfield Turner.
And Casey brought a terrifying new political mandate with him. The big objective was the anti-Sandinista Contra forces in Nicaragua.
Right, and the source documents reveal Casey's direct order: the total subordination of U.S. drug enforcement efforts to fund the Contras.
Subordination, meaning turn a blind eye.
More than that, Casey saw the drug trade as a necessary, unavoidable cost of running what he called higher geopolitical operations. He actively allowed 2 southern states to function as major distribution points for Latin American narcotics.
So he didn't just look away, he facilitated it.
He specifically directed the CIA network to interfere with any attempts by local police and FBI agents to shut down the supply chain. This formalized the drug trade as a black financing mechanism for the U.S. government.
So who ran this newly sanctioned drug pipeline? They must have had someone on the inside.
They relied heavily on a facilitator the agency had been using since 1981, a man named Adler Berriman Seal.
Barry Seal.
Barry Seal. His profile in the source material is deeply revealing. He's described not just as a smuggler, but as the major organizer, facilitator, and I love this word, impresario, of the partnership between the CIA and organized crime.
And he got rich doing it.
His share of the profits reportedly exceeded $30 million, and he cultivated this perfect cover, the affable, backslapping good old boy from Baton Rouge who just loved flying.
He was the critical logistics man.
Absolutely. He was channeling funds into aviation consultant businesses all over Latin America. Yeah. Through these companies, using what the sources call the KC airline, which was the O&A infrastructure seal, was smuggling massive multi-ton loads of marijuana and cocaine into the U.S.
And he was connected.
Oh, unbelievably so. What's fascinating here is his success in penetrating the highest levels of the drug world. Seal managed to establish direct contact with the most powerful figures of the Medellin cartel.
Pablo Escobar,
Jorge Ochoa, and Carlos Leader, the big 3. He used the CIA's existing aviation and distribution network to smuggle tons of cocaine in single shipments. The sources confirmed the CIA was fully aware of Seal's total actions and profits.
Okay, so to process this flood of cash and narcotics, the operation needed a secure staging area, a money laundering hub.
And this is where Manuel Noriega comes in, the head of the Panamanian Defense Forces Intelligence Unit.
Noriega. He had been on the CIA payroll for a while, right?
since 1976. And he was known to both Bush and Armitage. But Casey escalated this relationship dramatically.
How so?
The sources document that Casey agreed to pay Noriega a $500 million cash bribe.
$500 million.
$500 million.
All right.
Plus a staggering 1% of the value of everything that was shipped through Panama for the use of the territory.
And Panama's banking laws were perfect for this.
Notoriously lax. They were weaponized by the CIA to launder the flood of Medellin drug profits.
But this arrangement, it wasn't without internal opposition, right? This brings us back to the conflict between General Ferrera and Noriega.
It does. Ferrera, who had helped set up Eagle and Crete, was fundamentally opposed to partnering with known drug lords. It was a line he wouldn't cross.
So he tried to stop it.
In 1977, even before Casey took over, General Ferrera reported Noriega's drug dealing directly to the White House. But that report, it subsequently disappeared from the records. Vanished.
And the conflict got worse.
It escalated dramatically when Ferrera discovered Noriega was double-crossing the U.S. He was taking CIA money with one hand and providing intelligence to Fidel Castro with the other.
And Ferrera's reaction to this was personal and utterly shocking.
The documents state that Ferrera eventually went completely undercover in Panama, specifically to neutralize Noriega, to deal with him.
And this is where that chilling rumor in the FBI report comes from.
It is. The report includes the persistent, chilling rumor that Ferrera managed to infiltrate the general's compound, bound him, and personally mutilated Noriega.
How?
By cutting off his testicles in Noriega's own bedroom.
Hold on. The FBI report includes this rumor, but says the official documentation for it disappeared. How common is it for a top-secret report to document something that violent, but treat it as an unverified rumor?
It is extremely unusual, and it really speaks to the compartmentalization and the fear surrounding Ferrera. The Bureau records the incident, but notes that the documentation has vanished from their own vaults.
Which almost lends credence to the idea that the truth was immediately buried.
It does. And Ferrera, for his part, claimed this extreme action was the source of Noriega's subsequent cocaine addiction, and that the general couldn't expose the operation because he lived in constant crippling fear of Ferrera.
So this internal friction is happening, but the overall drug-running operation, which the sources call Supermarket, is running successfully under Casey and his aide, Colonel Oliver North.
It is. But the operation was fundamentally jeopardized when Barry Seals started attracting too much attention. He was getting sloppy, risking the crucial money laundering connection to North.
And Casey was motivated to protect that connection.
Highly motivated. He had to shield the vice president's office and the Contra funding stream, so he ordered Seal to clean up his act.
And the sources say Ferrera tried to intervene again.
He did. Ferrera contacted Casey, telling him he had intelligence that could expose the real leader of the drug cartel. Casey became, quote, very upset. He reportedly called Ferrera a fat son of a bitch and ordered him to stop or suffer the consequences.
So the silencing order came down.
Swift and brutal. On February 19, 1986, Seal pulled into a parking lot in Miami. He was executed in a horrifying show of overkill. Two men firing quick bursts from an MC-10 and a UZI submachine gun.
How bad was it?
The sources state 96 bullets shredded Seal's head and body. That level of violence. It wasn't just an assassination. It was a clear warning.
So what do the sources suggest was the intent behind such a public, brutal execution?
It seems it was twofold. First, the immediate elimination of a massive liability. Seal knew too much. Second, it was a clear message to anyone else who might be considering informing.
And the FBI knew Casey was involved.
According to the report, the Bureau had copies of all the tapped conversations with Casey. Conversations that confirmed the director's operational involvement and the order for Seal to be silenced.
So his death was a major turning point.
A huge one. It inadvertently toppled the direct source of funds for the Contras, and it initiated a domino theory that eventually led to the public discovery of the Iran-Contra affair. The whole operation was now moving into damage control.
By 1986, the original Operation Eagle II was basically finished, and the political heat was really rising. The original Gang of Five had scattered.
They had. Colby and Bush had left the CIA, though the documents note that Armitage remained operationally active, continuing the network with Bush's explicit knowledge.
So the biggest liability now was that massive 318 billion yen certificate of deposit in Japan.
Exactly. Helms, concerned about the exposure and the ongoing risk, made a strategic decision. He decided to stop the precise caching of the CD. The goal was no longer to convert it, but to avoid it, to make it go away.
And this decision is what triggered the end of the CD's brief, volatile life.
It did. In November of 1983, the Mitsui Bank and the Japanese government officially declared the instrument a blank and a forgery.
So they just disavowed it.
Completely, and it was immediately confiscated.
That move, it sounds like a deliberate act of financial erasure.
It was. By declaring it a forgery, Helms stopped the sale of the CD, and it gave the Iizuka Group, the Japanese conduit, a political cover story. Although everyone involved in Japan was later stripped of their assets, the political stability the money had bought was secured. The CD itself was officially wiped from existence to minimize risk to the American intelligence operation.
But even though Eagle 2 was closed, the operational network itself continued. It just morphed to avoid the scrutiny of General Ferrera.
Yes, because Ferrera was actively distancing himself from the narcotics trade.
He had a known aversion to the drug trade, the report says, despite his earlier role in sourcing the drugs.
Right, so to keep the flow of black money moving without Ferrera's oversight, the operation was renamed. It became Golden Triangle.
And the source material explicitly identifies Richard Armitage, the political intermediary, as the one who took charge of this continuation.
He did. He stepped into that vacuum.
So how do the sources reconcile this? The label of consummate double dealer and perfect triple crosser is applied to Armitage, but at the same time, he has this public profile as a straight-laced official. That seems like a massive contradiction that demands scrutiny.
The sources suggest this contradiction was his strength. Armitage was noted for his full knowledge of Eagle Tusik and Golden Triangle, and he publicly claimed an aversion to drug trafficking while he was simultaneously running the expanded drug-funded operation.
So he played both sides perfectly.
Perfectly. The FBI report estimates Armitage amassed a personal fortune exceeding $100 billion from his activities, a figure they believe he invested heavily in physical gold, deposited all across the Pacific Rim. He was the perfect continuity figure, operating in the deepest shadows while maintaining a spotless public image.
Okay, let's pivot back to Marion Horn, the Kentucky buyer. The core financial problem still remained. The enormous, now confiscated funds from the CD needed to be recovered, washed, and Horn had to be paid for his initial involvement.
Especially since he was now actively trying to dig into the organization to claim his share. He wasn't going away quietly.
So the solution was to create a new legal shell.
The Five Star Trust, or FST. It was established in 1989, registered in classic offshore havens like Nevis and the Isle of Man. And the documents are very clear on this. They label it as a cover, a phony front trust, set up with the specific legal goal of obtaining all the original funds tied to the CD and washing them.
And Horn, according to the documents, was simultaneously trying to recover funds and, in the process, trying to cheat the government out of some portion of those funds.
Which prompted Helms to make the ultimate decision. Horn must be silenced.
And this is where General Ferrera comes back in.
Despite his removal from active operational work, Ferrera agreed to arrange to put Horn away. This really highlights Ferrera's continued function as the ultimate fixer for the deepest levels of the intelligence community.
At the same time, they were trying to ruin him financially.
Yes. Horn was discreetly placed on the non grata book of Interpol and the World Banks. It's a process designed to destroy his financial reputation and his ability to operate globally. Interestingly, the documents note that recently his name has been totally erased from the Interpol files.
Suggesting a continued, highly sophisticated effort to control the narrative around him.
Exactly. But we have to look at the stated goals of the FST structure. Legal filings from the FST reveal an alleged 1997 agreement. It involved Horn, a Mr. Black, an attorney for the FST, and a Mr. Georges. And it was specifically designed to return these recovered funds to the U.S. government.
But the goals quickly expanded into a much larger geopolitical vision.
Much larger. The FST filings and a September 1989 letter sent via ABN Bank to President Salinas of Mexico detail this sweeping alleged plan involving Ferrera, Baron Guy Rothschild, and Marion Horn.
The Rothschilds are involved now.
According to this letter, yes. It confirms a plan to establish an international consortium of banks. It links the Rothschild Banking Group, Credit Suisse, ABN Bank, and institutions across Singapore, the Netherlands, and New Zealand.
For what purpose?
The ultimate stated objective was to establish a new world financial order, primarily backed by the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
A new world financial order funded by drug money.
The vision was to use these black operation funds, once they were washed, to transition the global economy toward a gold standard. They claimed this money would be used to distribute wealth to poor countries, thereby breaking the financial legacy of the Cold War.
That is an unbelievable juxtaposition.
It is. Baron Rothschild is specifically quoted in the documents as requesting the funds be deposited into a specific URC Latin American Bank Limited account, with the explicit instruction that the majority should help third world nations, starting with Mexico.
So we're forced to confront whether this mission of global stability was a genuine, if cynical, long-term goal, or if it was just another layer of elaborate deception to keep the money moving.
And that question takes us out of the realm of 1980s covert action and into the modern legal system, where Marion Horn tried to force disclosure using the courts.
Right. In 2003, Horn filed a massive Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, lawsuit in Washington, D.C. The case number is 1.03CV000725.
And Horn wasn't suing small players.
No. He sued President George W. Bush, the CIA, the Department of Defense, and various other high-level agencies. He demanded all records related to himself and the Five-Star Trust. He was basically trying to use the law to prove this entire deep dive narrative was real.
And the case dragged on for 2 years. The outcome is maybe the most telling piece of evidence about the secrecy involved.
The court ruled in favor of the defendants in 2005.
It did. And critically, the sources state that the ruling judge gave, quote, no statement of why the judgment was in favor of the defendants, other than the fact that they were given national security privileges.
So he sues and the government just says, national security, and that's it. Case closed.
That's it. It's the ultimate defense mechanism. The government was given national security privileges to avoid releasing any records that would prove the existence of Horn's claims or the FST's funds.
And the FST documents, how do they interpret that ruling?
They interpret it as definitive legal proof that the government will supersede individual rights and transparency when it needs to withhold information, even if that information proves a citizen's claim is real.
But the legal fight didn't end there, because the funds were still allegedly sitting offshore.
Exactly. In 2005 and 2006, Horn, along with Clarence T. Kingery Jr., who was a trustee, and the highly credible ambassador Maurice Moore, the former UN ambassador from the Bahamas, made a concerted attempt to recover the actual funds.
Ambassador Moore is a key figure here.
A very key figure. He confirmed the existence of 84 worldwide accounts, with a substantial total. Specifically, the sources assert that $135 billion was confirmed in deposits.
Where?
At Barclays Bank plc in the Isle of Man and Dresdner Bank AG in Frankfurt, Germany.
The significance of a former UN ambassador confirming the existence of $135 billion in global bank accounts tied to a trust the U.S. government claims is fake. I mean, that cannot be overstated.
It can't. Moore confirmed this money had originated from FST Investments Ltd., a subsidiary of the Five-Star Trust.
And what was the plan for the money?
The sources suggest it was complex. The funds were intended to be moved into the U.S. Treasury, but with specific portions earmarked for the Nigerian government and for Cuban interests. This suggests the funds had been used as leverage in ongoing, highly sensitive international negotiations spanning decades.
But the recovery attempt was a catastrophic failure.
A complete failure. The sources document that the funds were actively being withdrawn as of March 7, 2006. And Moore was reportedly told that the money did not belong to FST, but rather to the Nigerian government and Cuban interests. It just slipped through their fingers.
And what was the sticking point? Why did it collapse?
The documents indicate the key sticking point was General Ferrera. Moore was told explicitly that the settlement to recover the funds was conditional.
Conditional on what?
On the U.S. government agreeing not to take any legal action against General Ferrera.
And the government refused.
The government reportedly refused to agree to this condition. They refused to guarantee protection for the man the FBI report warned about. And when that happened, the entire recovery attempt collapsed, and the money vanished into other accounts.
So this legal chapter, it confirms the narrative on two essential points. First, that major international figures confirm the existence and valuation of these offshore accounts.
Yes. And second, that the U.S. government used every available mechanism, from explicit national security court rulings to conditional political negotiations, to prevent these funds and their origins from ever seeing the light of day.
We have to return now to General Robert L. Ferrera, the subject of that original FBI warning. The report describes him as the single common link across 3 decades of these operations.
And his description is just so contradictory. A decorated founder of the Green Berets who was simultaneously involved in clandestine assassinations and drug operations.
The FBI report describes him as a subject of supposition and strong suspicion regarding his status as the top worldwide CIA free agent.
That term free agent is crucial here. The sources define it as an agent capable of conducting clandestine operations and assassinations, but operating completely outside traditional chains of command. The report states Ferrera was responsible only to the real, secret director of the CIA, Mr. Helms.
So he was a ghost.
A ghost in the machine. The FBI confirms they had taped conversations between Ferrera and the powerful Baron Philippe Daphne, as well as with Helms, confirming his status was deeply buried in secrecy, protected from official records.
And he was protected by the White House.
So protected that some within the Justice Department considered him an untouchable. Despite being targeted for 2 separate silence attempts in 2 years, attempts that, if successful, would have terminated the central source of information, both failed. The sources state the Oval Office knew that to cross the general would endanger the administration itself.
But the narrative around Ferrera is complex. The sources claim he was trying to clean things up at the end.
It seems so. They claim he had amassed a significant personal debt from running these operations and was taking huge financial risks. Helms confirmed Ferrera's word that he would never divulge any part of the operation, agreeing to Ferrera's request to be removed from all assignments and pay.
But only on one condition.
Only if the profits from the drug operation were redirected to service personnel and all operations were officially terminated. Ferrera, in this telling, was trying to clean up the chaos that he helped create.
So let's move to Richard Armitage. He's the financial and political successor.
He is. The FBI report paints him as the ultimate continuity figure, possessing full, detailed knowledge of both the Eagle II and Golden Triangle drug operations.
He's the definition of contradiction in these sources.
He is. The FBI explicitly mentions his total aversion to the drug trade, yet he became the consummate double dealer and perfect triple crosser in the continuation of the drug-funded network after Ferrera stepped down.
And the financial consequences of his control were just staggering.
Our agents estimated, and we are told this figure comes directly from the FBI Bureau's internal estimates, that Armitage amassed a personal fortune exceeding $100 billion.
$100 billion.
Agents suspected that this enormous sum was invested in physical gold, deposited all across the Pacific Rim. It just demonstrates the sheer scale of the financial scheme running parallel to the covert ops.
And this entire deep dive, it's rooted in source material that not only details secrecy, but confirms the systematic destruction of its own history.
Yes. The FBI report concludes with the ultimate act of historical erasure, what it calls the missing link.
What is that?
The report concludes with a chilling, explicit instruction ordered by the Justice Department. All inquiries regarding the CD, the funds, and a specific informant named Binet are to be stopped immediately, and all documentation pertaining to them is being shredded.
And Horn and Ferrera.
The order deemed them to be considered untouchables, signaling that the investigation into the operation was officially permanently over.
And there's proof of this destruction in the report itself.
There is. A handwritten note on a confidential page from the OECD states. Note, some pages of this report are missing. The original copy is filed with CIA and FBI and NSA, Washington, D.C. The history we've just explored is literally fragmented and incomplete because the keepers of the secrets shredded the evidence themselves.
So what this source material collectively documents is a decades-long covert network, launched at the highest levels of the U.S. government to bypass Congress, using political bribery in Japan, orchestrating massive drug running to fund geopolitical conflicts, and using assassination to maintain security.
And the entire structure culminated in a multi-billion-dollar legal dispute that was ultimately sealed under the impenetrable veil of national security grounds. We're just left with these conflicting realities. The documents assert the funds are real, but the government claims they don't exist.
So what we've spent time unpacking today is really a snapshot of history, compartmentalized, bloody, and financially staggering, that was never meant to be unified or understood.
Not at all.
We started with a top-secret report warning that its contents could cause total disarray if revealed, and we found confirmation of everything from systematic drug importation into the U.S., directed by the CIA, to the movement of these astronomical sums of money across global banks, all protected by the highest political office.
The scale is just. It's simply unbelievable. From the creation of a shadow airline, ONA, designed to run narcotics, to the confirmed existence of $135 billion in offshore accounts by a former UN ambassador. The source material paints a picture of operations that were designed to be self-funding and self-protecting, totally outside democratic oversight.
And the documents explicitly link top government and intelligence officials, including directors of the CIA, to acts that the FBI report itself details as criminal and destructive. The legal documents from the Five-Star Trust claimed the funds were real, confirming their existence in major European banks as late as 2006.
And yet, the government insisted they were fakes and sealed all the records under national security, basically just drawing a curtain over the entire affair.
So you have to decide where the truth lies in this fundamental conflict between the meticulously documented claims of those involved in the trust and the government's unwavering refusal to acknowledge the operation, using national security as the ultimate defense to stop any information from getting out.
Stuck choice.
It is. We've seen how extreme compartmentalization was used to launch and conceal this operation, protecting those at the very top for decades. So if highly sensitive information that could cause total disarray, if revealed, can be confined to just a handful of people and then systematically erased and sealed by the courts, this raises a profound final question.
What other protected suppressed histories, managed by untouchable agents and backed by astronomical, unauditable black funds, are currently influencing our world?
That we aren't even allowed to ask.